Welcome to Story Time for Lent. My name is Carol Paus and I'm the principal of St. Ignatius School. Today we're going to hear a frog and toad story called The Garden. And this relates to our Sunday Gospel story about the fig tree. In the Gospel story, the fig tree was not growing and the gardener was thinking about cutting it down. But instead, he had some patience and tended to it gently. Eventually, the tree began to grow. Let's see what happens with Frog and Toad in this story about the garden. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog. "And soon you will have a garden." "Well, how soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and he listened loudly. Then he said, "Now seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again and the seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very, very close to the ground and he shouted, "Now seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. "My seeds will not grow," said Toad. "You are shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds are afraid to grow." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow." That night, Todd looked out of his window. "Drat," said Toad. "My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark." Toad went out to his garden with some candles. "I will read the seeds a story," said Toad. "Then they will not be afraid." Toad read a long story to his seeds. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. All the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. "What shall I do?" cried Toad. "These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world." Then Toad felt very tired and he fell asleep. "Toad, Toad, wake up," said Frog. "Look at your garden." Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. "At last," shouted Toad, "my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow." "And now you will have a nice garden too," said Frog. "Yes," said Toad, "but you were right, Frog. It was very hard work." Now that's the end of our story today, but I wonder if while you were listening to the story, you were thinking about something that was maybe hard for you to do. Maybe you tried and tried and tried to learn something or learn a new skill, and you just felt like you couldn't do it. I wonder if that's a really great time to ask for God's help. God's help to be brave and keep trying and learn to grow and let your light shine through. That's what I do when I'm trying to get something done, or I want to try a new skill, or I want to learn something. I know it takes a lot of hard work, just like growing the garden, but I ask for God's help and I ask for God's strength, and He helps me every time. May you take the rest of this Lent to learn to ask for God's help and rely on your faith as you learn and grow.